Here's what we know. 50 million plus people have tried Dungeons and Dragons. 13 million people play regularly, but that's a 37 million person gap. Tonight, we're going to talk about what's in that gap and why communities like ours might be one of the most important things happening in the hobby right now. We are excited to bring you Dragons, Dungeons, and Drinks 2026 State of the Community. So, for those who don't know, my name is Renee. I am the Grand Mastress and founder of Dragons, Dungeons, and Drinks.
And I am Marcus. I am the Business Barbarian for Dragons, Dungeons, and Drinks.
When I was in Las Vegas, I stumbled upon this Dungeons and Dragons night at a tiki bar, and I brought that back to Minneapolis, and I saw that there were really two things that needed to be addressed. The first one is that it's really hard to make friends as an adult. Like, where do you even meet people? And two, it's really hard to get into Dungeons and Dragons unless you know someone into Dungeons and Dragons. And so that's where Dragons, Dungeons, and Drinks came from. The first adventure I wrote, I had 30 people who showed up randomly from a Facebook event. And now, nearly 3 years later, we've grown to over 2,500 adventurers and 150 game masters. And here's the thing. I think that this can happen elsewhere too. I think that there are a lot of communities out there just waiting to be organized, and we would love to share that with you. But one of the things that makes this conversation a little bit different than some of the other conversations we've had is that we're really trying to reflect on the current moment. In 2026, D&D is at an inflection point. It is commercially incredibly successful. I am seeing D&D everywhere, on everything. Everyone's talking about it, and they have been for a few years.
Yeah, definitely.
That being said, there's been a lot of transitions of talent in the industry. There's been a lot of people coming up, content creators and game designers who are really forging an ecosystem that is never really been seen in the tabletop industry.
Yeah. And where I actually see it is that we are one of the easiest ways to actually get involved with play. It's a good way to actually connect with people within the community, to be able to not just play with us, but get involved with Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah. Well, and I love that. And I think that one of the misnomers is that there's just one community.
Yeah.
Because, like, we are certainly not the spokespeople for the community.
No.
But we interface with three really important segments of the community on a daily, weekly, monthly level. And in an exponentially growing way. I think that it's important for us to kind of talk about that. There's essentially three types of players in the scene, right? So we have our new players. We have our monthly players and our weekly players.
So the new player territory, a lot of what I see, since I talk with a lot of people as they're coming to our events, they're people that tangentially know about D&D, but not necessarily have actually engaged with the game directly. So right now, we're in kind of that boom culturally with D&D, and what I see a lot of people come through is I've played Baldur's Gate before, I watch Critical Role, or I watch Dimension 20, and then they get this interest about it, and if you've never played D&D before, the amount of lore is just massive, and it's basically really curious people that don't know how to get started, because guess what? When you get started, all the dice look the same.
Well, and I think that's one reason why our events are just so perfect for new players, because they walk in the door, they have a warm, friendly face that has a set of dice for them.
Mm-hmm.
They come in, they have our pre-generated, curated character sheets. They're beautiful, they're streamlined, and they kind of cut down on some of that imposter fear of, oh, if I don't know what this character does, then I'm not going to be able to play correctly, and helping players really understand. No, everybody starts somewhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's so few places where you can just walk in off the street and play D&D and also feel like you're kind of being welcomed into something.
Yeah.
There is, however, another flavor of player, and that's the monthly player. These are the schedulers.
Yeah, so I would say the monthly players is where a lot of our business comes from, and a lot of where the community lies. And the reason why that people are committing to monthly play and kind of that intermediary is because there's a ton of work that goes into playing in a weekly campaign. First of all, you have to organize up to 5 to 6 adult schedules, which Try doing that. It's pretty impossible. And not only that, if you have a really dedicated game master, they have to spend a ton of time preparing week in and week out. So these monthly people, a lot of it is they just want to be able to have like their monthly reliable experience of joy with D&D. They're people that know the rules, they know the culture, they engage with the community, but they might not have the accessibility to be able to play more, or they might not have the time to play more. And one of the archetypes that we see with this is, oh, I played when I was a kid, or I had a campaign a couple of years ago, and then we all got busy or we all grew up and they're trying to get back into it. So it's this area where they're usually pretty experienced, but what we were talking about with accessibility is usually the main thing that prevents them from being able to play more consistently.
Yeah. Yeah. And then there's this third
Yeah, the hardcore
category.
players,
Yeah,
right?
your folks who are invested, they're weekly players.
Yeah.
They're in multiple campaigns. I see these folks come in to our spaces in two particular ways. I see them come in as game masters, wanting to run adventures.
Yep.
And what they tell us all the time is, oh, thank you for the adventure guide you wrote. I barely had to do any prep. This is really great. But then we also hear, oh, I just want to play.
Yeah.
I'm a game master who has been trying very hard to keep a campaign together or something like that. This is an opportunity for me to actually just show up and play.
Like,
Yeah.
if you are finding enough time to play on a weekly basis, it's probably one of your favorite hobbies. And we see that with the community. These people are also the people who tend to bring the most people in. If you have someone who's such a pillar of the community, they're the ones that tend to be these really cultural tentpole bearers.
Yeah. These three sections have very different needs
Yeah.
and very different expectations
Yeah.
of what D&D is and specifically what their first game will be like. This is not just a nerdy hobby
No.
that people in the 80s do and try not to let kids at school know that they do
Yeah.
anymore. This is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Yeah, the stat that we found was that, again, 50 million people have tried D&D,
Mhm.
but only 13 million play regularly.
Yeah. That's quite a gap, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a
Yeah,
huge
yeah,
gap.
decay of,
37
like,
million people. Like,
80% of people drop off.
but something about the third space that we chose, being mostly breweries, has made it so that community forms a bit more organically.
One thing that we always talk about is we have this group called the Usual Suspects that
Mm.
they met at one of our events, and they're pretty much a group of best friends now, and they hang out and play with each other outside of our events all the time. And we kind of see that happen time and time again.
One thing that we learned pretty early on was that we needed to create other intentional spaces for
Yeah.
folks to meet outside of just organized play.
Yeah.
Our social hours are, I just think, so fun.
Yeah, and don't forget our sober programming too, which is incredibly important because one thing that we have our aspirations on is we have I would call our core value of ours is radical diversity. And part of that is we do have drinks in the name, but that doesn't mean it's part of our inherent values. We want to make sure that we're inviting everybody. One thing that we've done that's really awesome is partnered with the Pride Cultural Arts Center to be able to run sober programming there. So it's been really awesome being able to start at this one point and be able to really bring it out and provide a safe space for the community.
Yeah, one thing I have felt very personally proud of is that for quite a while,
Yeah.
D&D has belonged to a very specific subset of people. There
Yeah.
has been a certain age demographic, a certain racial demographic, gender demographic, where people were actively excluded from the hobby.
Yeah.
And that has culturally turned on its head. About 50% of our community is either LGBTQ, woman, or genderqueer identified. And so the fact that folks from these communities that have historically been excluded feel safer playing with folks that we put them at tables with and that they can. One thing I'm particularly proud of, and I think that this actually helps us transition to our next talking point, is about who are our game masters?
Yeah.
Who are the people who are actually acting as the face of our adventures? And I am so impressed by the fact that we have so many women who are
Yeah.
GMs for us and they feel comfortable GMing for us. I think that the more diverse your community is, the stronger it
Yeah.
is, because one of our core values is challenge with compassion. there are so many times where we have blind spots, and to have GMs from other parts of our community with different life experiences be able to challenge us compassionately and say, "Hey, have you thought about that?" It has it's completely transformed the way that we do business.
Yeah, one thing I find particularly interesting too is if you're talking about the diversity, we're seeing a lot of it come from younger players. When we're looking at the people that comprise of our community, we have people of all ages, but when we look, Gen Z and younger millennials tend to be the people that have the most diversity within the people that are coming, both in GMs and adventurers.
Mhm. I think that you almost gave away, but I will formally give away our secret, which is D&D is not about the rules. It's not about the encounters. It's about a feeling of safety.
Yeah.
It is about a feeling of safety that gets cultivated so that people can play, which is so hard to do. To let your guard down and say something silly or not understand a rule but want to try it anyways, that emotional safety is what has completely transformed our community.
Yeah. A lot of adults just feel guilty about having fun. I have that happen to me all the time, but this is kind of an opportunity for you to just be leaving the baggage at the door. And part of that is you don't have to feel like fun is conditional when you're
Mhm.
playing. You can just enjoy the moment.
At the end of the day, you and I are essentially grassroots organizers.
Yeah. Yeah.
We are the people who are on the ground, handing out folders, connecting people, getting phone numbers, replying to emails. Most people, most players, I don't want to say most, but so many players can't even find a GM.
Yeah, it's a problem. It's probably, I will say not probably, it is the biggest challenge to playing because when you talk with people that never played, it's kind of a paradox. How do you play? Well, you need someone who's experienced. How do you get someone who's experienced? Well, you play.
The point is that everybody wants to play, but nobody wants to be the
Yeah.
weekly GM who takes
Yeah.
responsibility and does all the prep. I think that there's a little bit of I don't know if paradox is the right word, but there's a conflict here where many people, rightly so, believe that there's something really important about
Yeah.
being a volunteer GM or just doing it for the love of the game. It's not everyone needs to be a professional GM, and I certainly don't think that. But being a GM is labor.
It
It is
is.
hard
It is
work.
hard. It's really challenging, especially if you're running something that's not a preset module. You have to basically come up with a new story every single week. And not only that, you have to figure out and think about how your players are going to interact. And guess what? You can do all of that. And then your players decide that they want to skip all of that. And now you have to make it up all on the fly.
One of the most common skills that I have game masters tell me that they want to develop in is improv and being able to handle those moments at the table where things have gone off the rail.
Yeah.
And so this year we did start something new, and I would love to speak about it a little bit, but we saw that there are so many people who want to be GMs, who want to take the dive and start a campaign of their own, but they just don't feel confident.
Yeah.
It really impacts how they show up at the table. And so one thing that we've started this year is our first fellowship program. And one thing I love about this fellowship program is that it walks people through the course of a year, not just what are the rules of D&D, but what are the associated skills
Yeah.
that need to go with it. It creates this sort of pipeline in some ways of game masters who feel prepared, they feel confident, and they know that they have spent a year building a cohort of community that can then build more community when it comes to actually
Yeah.
interfacing with players.
The Mercer paradox kind of hurts with that too. Mercer paradox,
Mercer
Mercer
effect,
effect.
yeah.
And the reason why is because it's like when you see these really high level DMs doing incredible work, you think to yourself, I can never do that, so I'm not even going to try. And like it takes a ton of confidence to DM your first game. I didn't even until like last year. And here's the secret that nobody tells you. One, nobody knows what they're doing the first time they do it. And two, if you don't, you're the DM, you can make shit up.
You can. Another, I think, really important thing that we would be remiss if we didn't talk about in this is the OGL.
Yeah.
And basically, this sort of wound that happened in the TTRPG community. For folks who aren't familiar, in 2023, Wizards of the Coast was proposing licensing changes that impacted negatively the entire third-party creator ecosystem. Thousands of fans signed protest letters, and pretty much 90% of surveyed people indicated that they rejected the plan. But what's coming out of that, I think, is what's really important. Because here's the thing. Conflict is always going to happen.
Mhm.
Mistakes are always going to happen.
Mhm.
But the real question of integrity is what happens afterwards.
Yep.
How do we repair? How do we rebuild trust? This is a situation where Wizards of the Coast reversed course. They placed the rules system under Creative Commons so that they could be used by everyone. They made a concerted effort to make sure that the free rule sets were out there for players. It's really a destabilizing event in the fact that a lot of people left D&D.
Yes. Yep.
I have a lot of people who ask us about why we do D&D, why we do D&D 2024, if we would do other systems. What I will say is that I am a big believer in rebuilding
Yeah.
trust. And I think that part of the way that we rebuild trust as far as the D&D community, Wizards of the Coast, our
Yeah.
community, is to show up in really authentic ways. This last summer, I worked up the courage, I guess you could say, to directly contact Dan Ayub. And Dan is the new head of D&D, essentially. And I just kind of cold reached out and said, hey, here's our story. I would love to connect.
Yep.
He reached back. And I feel like our conversations that we've had have been really, really supportive. And I think that one thing I really appreciate about the conversations that we've had is that there's not a sort of like dismissiveness to it. There's a lot of, yep, we know the wounds that have occurred and we're actively working to rebuild trust.
Mhm.
And I guess I'm curious from your perspective, what are some of the important elements of rebuilding trust?
Yeah, so I think fundamentally trust is built between people, not organizations. Something that you can try really hard as if you are coming at someone as I am the leader of this organization and you should trust me because of that, you're going to be losing that battle. You have to come to them as a individual and a person.
Mhm.
And not only that, you have to build community from the ground up, not the top down. At the core of it, it's saying that you're going to do something and sticking to it. Because one problem that we've seen really arise with this community in the past has just been there is a lot of anxiousness because we are not sure exactly what the future holds. And if you every single time do what you say you're going to do, then you know what the future holds.
Yeah, and I do see Wizards of the Coast doing that, which
I
is
do
great.
too,
I
yeah.
see them connecting with content
Well,
creators
and
and
one thing is the people that we've talked to actually love D&D, and this is coming out at a time in pop culture where we've all seen the burger wars or whatever, where the
yeah,
CEOs are barely even able to take a bite of their burgers, and it's the complete opposite with our interactions with Wizards of the Coast, where they're, yeah, I grew up playing this. This is
right.
freaking awesome.
Yeah, or I met my wife or whatever,
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that's just really important to remember because again, we're talking about a multi-billion-dollar industry,
Yeah.
which means that there are resources to invest in infrastructure of grassroots organizers to turn some of those 37 million people who have tried D&D but don't
Mhm.
do it regularly into passionate hobbyists.
Yeah.
And I think that one other thing that's really important to me that I'm seeing in these conversations and just sort of my observations of Wizards is that they are not rushing in the sense of companies and leaders try and sort of let's put this past us behind us as quickly as we can.
Yeah.
I think that everyone is sort of taking a breath and really trying to learn from these past mistakes. And so I'm very optimistic, but I will also say that I'm incredibly protective. I'm
Yeah.
incredibly protective of my players. I'm incredibly protective of my game masters. One thing that I have a curiosity around is that there's this big push by Wizards to go digital.
Hmm.
Video games, online playing, I get it. But I really do wonder, what is the on the ground in person play? Because we live in this increasingly digital world. Why is it important for people to play in person?
I think at the heart of it is we're in the business of making friends, and it's way easier to make friends in person. There's just something human. One of the most important things for making friends is proximity. Being able to actually be with each other in person, you're able to pick up on more and more quickly than online. And I think there's also just something kind of untangible about actually playing with physical stuff that is just inherently much different than playing digitally. For me, when I hear the dice roll, I get a little bit of a dopamine kick, which I don't get digitally. And also, it's if you look at the history of D&D, it's all been led by in-person efforts.
Mhm.
You've cultivated a culture of in-person efforts, and subconsciously a lot of the core values of the community are revolving around those in-person aspects. And there has to be a balance. And digital is incredibly important because it's a catalyst for growing the community. It can speed things up a ton. And we incorporate digital with our community too. We have a thriving Discord community, which is digital communication. But I don't think that community would be nearly as strong without the in-person events that we have. It can speed up the growth, but it doesn't increase the magnitude of it.
Well, and I think, again, living in a post pandemic world, people are so hungry
Oh, yeah.
for going out and doing things
Yeah.
and making real connections with real people. We really want people to show up who they are. We take great pride in trying to connect people. I feel so grateful that over the last few years, I have gotten to know hundreds of GMs, thousands of players, vendors and artists and people doing really cool stuff. And I know that not everyone can do that.
Yeah.
Not everyone can build that type of infrastructure, but that once the infrastructure is in place, they can find their place in
Yeah.
that infrastructure. And if I had to really kind of sum up what is the state of the D&D community right
Mhm.
now, I would probably say that it is, how do I want to phrase it? It is not fractured, but diversified.
Yeah, there's pockets of it,
Yeah, it's
right?
pockets. That's the perfect
Yeah.
word to describe it. And I hear that we've started experimenting with doing these sorts of things in other cities. And what we hear is, oh, well, yeah, there's pockets of people. There's
Mhm.
this podcast and they do their stuff. And then there's this game store and they do some stuff. And there's some players and they do their stuff. But what we really offer is the ability to organize all of that and bring it under kind of one banner and say, hey, look, the D&D community is more than a business. It is more than a single group of friends. It is a culmination of all of these different folks who, at the end of the day, really value the transformative power of play. Storytelling, which is essentially what D&D is one of humanity's oldest traditions.
Mhm.
And so to create spaces where people can engage with that and they don't have to feel fear, they can feel supported and welcomed and they don't have to be someone that they're not or have experience that they don't, is transformational. And one thing I'm very hopeful for is that we can sort of start to share this with other communities in other cities to say, hey, if we can do this here, you can do this in your community.
A big change that we saw was with the 2024 rule set. And from my point of view is, yeah, it was a big change and it was controversial, but one thing that it made was it made it way easier for new players to navigate.
The biggest barrier is not the rules.
Mhm.
It's loneliness and disconnection. People don't like struggle to understand armor class. They struggle to find 5 people who are willing to sit with them and play pretend as adults,
Yeah.
you know? And that's kind of what we solve, you know?
Yeah.
Everything else is just dice. Well, and it also speaks to what new players actually need, you know? The
Mhm.
most important rule in D&D is not gonna be found in the rule book.
No.
It's the rule where the DM says, you know, "There are no wrong answers
Yeah.
here. What do you wanna do? You can't mess this up," right?
Mhm.
And to give people that permission that they've got you, you know, that it's not something that you're gonna find in a rule book that builds that out. It's gonna be culture,
Yeah.
and culture is cultivated in community. It's not something that can be just dictated. And so when we think about designing the game of the future and supporting the community of the
Yeah.
future, the community is diverse, which means that inclusion is not just, you know, saying you're welcome here. It's about standing up when someone says something or does something that is harmful,
Yeah.
or when external factors come into your community and create disharmony. Wizards of the Coast, which is an institution that is essentially D&D
Yeah.
itself, and then there's the community. There's
Mhm.
this corporation and community. I don't want Wizards of the Coast to not be a business. Like, I
Yeah.
don't want them
Yeah.
to not be a company. I don't want them to not be successful. If anything, what I really want is I want them to be successful, but to know that success is directly connected to the relationship they have with the community. And that if you want Dungeons and Dragons to be successful, you can't just put out good products. You
Yeah.
can't just put out stellar art and like neat encounters. You need to have relationships with the people who are doing grassroots organizing in their cities and really building communities.
Yeah, it's kinda like a lot of people are planting seeds in the community right now. Wizards of the Coast, if they can fertilize those seeds, it's gonna make it so that when they come to harvest, everyone's going to be successful.
Yeah.
And I agree too. This game would not be where it was if it stayed in the original creator's basement.
Yeah.
And the reason why it's an internationally recognized product is because of Wizards of the Coast.
What is the state of the community in just a sentence or two? And where do we hope it will go from here?
Yes. So right now, when I'm thinking of the state of the community, and we touched on it before, is there's some really passionate pockets of people. And these people are working on basically promoting what they think is going to push the community forward, which is not always aligned with other pockets. And the opportunity right now, like for organizations like us, is to be able to get some unity there. And then the last thing too is like, this is kind of a phase of rebuilding trust too. Like, I've seen it and people are gradually warming up to it. With the conversations that I've had, people are seeing that Wizards of the Coast is trying to do good.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's a very exciting time to be a part of the community. And I think it's also a time that it's just generally accepted, which hasn't always been the case either.
Rebuilding trust is a process. It doesn't happen overnight. I'm seeing such good things out of it. And luckily, I do see more people coming back to the game and saying, like, yeah, you know, I wasn't sure, but I thought I'd give the new
Mhm.
rules a try or something like that. And so my hope is that there is this continued synergy that we work together
Yeah.
because at the end of the day, we all kind of have the same goal, which is that we really want to see people play, you know, and see people make connections. And as long as we center that, we're going to see really just positive results. And so as far as the state of the D&D community, it's in a growing phase and
Mhm.
that it is growing in a really great direction. But that doesn't mean we can get lazy. It doesn't mean we can cut corners. And it means that at the end of the day, we need to really listen to each other and make sure everyone is invited to the table so that all perspectives can be
Mhm.
considered.
Yeah, I the feeling that I have overall is super optimistic.
Yeah,
I am overall a pretty optimistic person, but it really feels like D&D is on the precipice of even greater things.
totally.
I think that if you want to get involved with this community, like the best time probably was in the 80s. The second best time is right now.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a great segue. So, if you are interested in learning more about Dragons, Dungeons, and Drinks, you can find us at dddmn.com or dragonsdungeonsdrinks.com. And we would love to connect with you, particularly if you are, like us,
Yeah.
organizers. If you are wanting to build a D&D community in your space, we would love to share our knowledge and the resources and infrastructure we have. So, because we are not gatekeepers, that is for
No,
sure.
no.
And so, thank you to everyone who took the time to listen. And yeah, we hope to connect with you soon.
Yeah, and may the dice be in your favor.